None of the billions that were being offered were going to the WTA. Brands weren't just chasing Eala Alex. They were skipping the whole tour. A 19-year-old Filipino had improved his financial utility than a professional circuit built over 50 years. Not by dominating the Grand Slam or the rankings. Via pure, unchecked cultural magnetism, which is considerably more dangerous to the establishment, and when financial figures began to surface, the tennis community held its breath rather than merely raising eyebrows. Since what was happening was a power shift and a small-scale corporate revolution rather than a sponsored story. Camouflaged as a tennis skirt, and the WTA never saw it coming since they were locked in. After reading this, you'll see why the most important battle in women's tennis at the moment isn't taking place on any court. There are some athletes that excel in their sport before it is appropriately acknowledged. Muhammad Ali was the one who did it was done by Serena Williams. And now, whether or not the WTA organization approves of it, Alexandra Eala is doing it on corporate boardrooms from Manhattan to Manila, completely redesigning their marketing blueprints. Born in the Philippines, raised with strict discipline, and trained at the Rafael Nadal Academy, Eala brought something to professional tennis from Mallorca that no coaching manual could impart. Her story connected with billions of people because it was a genuine cross-continental, multi-generational story. People concurrently in the Americas, Europe, and Southeast Asia. This combination, the location of the underdog, the contagious charm, and the prestigious European training ground produced what marketing executives describe in private as a significant convergence of cultures. Long before the rankings caught up, businesses were aware of this. Eala's social media following had already surpassed that of many higher-ranked players by the time she was making waves on the WTA Tour. Her Instagram engagement statistics weren't only impressive for a tennis player. They were powerful enough for any athlete. In any field, anywhere in the world. Companies that measure genuine audience interaction rather than just counting, but true communities' genuine emotional investment, were looking at data that prompted their analysts to double-check. Sports companies, high-end watch manufacturers, computer giants, and telecom companies with enormous Southeast Asian markets. They were actively competing, not just showing interest. Behind closed doors, discussions were progressing from exploratory to serious financial obligations. Importantly, these conversations were not taking place via WTA partnering channels. They were headed straight for Eala's representation. This distinction is quite significant. The WTA operates within a traditional sports marketing framework. Income models built around the community, official tour partnerships, and centralized sponsorships. Although it was designed for a different era, the model worked well for decades. A time frame prior to a single athlete might attract more online attention than the entire company's promotion of her. Eala stood for all that the old model had not taken that into consideration. A player whose unique brand gravity was completely removing sponsors from the tour's orbit. Just by being there and engaging with audiences on a regular basis, without dispute or conflict. That the institutional voice of WTA was unable to match. Rumors were growing among tennis circles. Brand partners began informing agents representing other players that budget allocations were being examined. Sponsors of the tournament started to get more subdued responses to proposals for rejuvenation. Women's tennis wasn't losing money. It was concentrating, heading for a single, distinct center of cultural gravity. And there was a term for that moment. There was a backhand to that point that might disrupt conversations. And that was only the beginning. Ask yourself this question. When was the last time a teenager significantly changed billion-dollar companies? Reconsider their entire approach to sports marketing. Because it was already there at that point. There is a way for numbers to escape. Rooms. They were never meant to leave. The figures being discussed in confidential conversations about small endorsement arrangements were part of Alex Aya's individual sponsorship portfolio. These weren't your typical mid-tier layouts that are frequently obtained by professional tennis players who are not in the top 10. What was discussed behind closed doors? Preliminary agreements term sheets showed a type of financial commitment that put a player who is still rising in the standings, in business talks often meant for well-established Grand Slam champions. According to reports from the sports industry, each brand provides comparable data. These, when combined across numerous relationships, created a portfolio value estimated in millions of dollars. But when projected across several years of commitments, in the billions. A massive telecom company with a significant market share in Southeast Asia was supposedly one of the top runners on a number of sportswear companies analyzing the cultural impact. AIA maintained control over a big and growing consumer base that entered significant discussions. She was viewed as indispensable by technology companies looking for genuine ambassador voices in emerging areas. These offers were unique not just because of their size but also because of their structure. Brands weren't getting close to Aya's team, wondering how she would fit into the current structures for WTA neighboring partnerships. They were building completely custom configurations, creative collaborations, ownership stakes, and sponsored content initiatives. Long-term ambassador structures that regarded her as more than just an athlete but also a media entity. Endorser. In an interview with industry publications, a sports marketing analyst outlined the situation with startling candor. Brands have essentially determined that the emotional bond Aya created with the viewer was more successfully accessible by traveling around the tour rather than through it. The official partnering infrastructure of the WTA. Despite being useful for reaching big tennis audiences, it was unable to provide the precise, incredibly faithful, culturally unique groups that personally adhered to Aya. This fact carried significant financial consequences for the WTA. Consequences when businesses shift sponsorship funds from corporate alliances to individual. When athletes transact outside of tour buildings, the group's power is diminished. Visibility is lost for other players. Financial streams are lost in smaller competitions. The burden is felt by the entire ecosystem. Additionally, this is the dimension that genuinely made things more tense. This situation wasn't created by Aya. She wasn't positioning herself in an antagonistic manner, opposing any kind of establishment. Her representation was only providing appropriate commercial response to extraordinary market demand. Strategy. That isn't a revolt, that's business. However, the WTA's penalties were the same for all purposes. Tour execs were having heated conversations behind closed doors. How can a company maintain sponsorship value when one of its members is now a more desirable individual investment compared to the shared platform? How can commercial frameworks designed for a pre-social media environment to support an athlete whose fan base is far larger than the institution's? These were no longer speculative strategic inquiries. They needed answers very away. And the WTA appear to be looking for the answers far too slowly for reasons that will eventually become highly public. Whether Aya deserved these offers wasn't the big question. Nobody actually questioned that. Much more unsettling was the question that was tearing through tennis boardrooms. Had the commercial already been lost by the WTA story? And if so, would they ever be able to get it back? In times of systemic crisis, silence is never really silent. It conveys, indicates everything. Alex Aya's brand talks became more intense. The WTA's official communication was starting to connect the dots in sports business media. Routes were noticeably quiet. No official recognition, no declaration of strategic positioning. No discernible attempt to reframe the commercial conversation on their terms. Just institutional silence. Just when it was most important to take decisive action. And it was horrible to be silent in today's media landscape. The inability of an organization to control its own narrative creates more than just a void. Everyone is given the microphone. Tennis journalist.